Hello, I'm Greg Harrison with the USDA Market News Service here in St. Joe, Missouri with your National Feeder Cattle Summary this week. Well, feeder cattle and calves compared to last week continue to follow through on support from last week, trading mostly steady to $5 higher this week. We got instances on some calves trading anywhere from $10 and spots even $15 higher, just kind of depending on where you're at. But for the most part, the market was steady to $5 higher. Last couple of weeks, it seems like maybe the market has found some legs under it. But whether this market has found long legs or short legs, well, it seems to be at this time difficult to say. Just when you think that the market's kind of turned around some, it can't stand prosperity and has a major sell-off, whether it's in the futures or whether it's even in the cash market. But despite the frozen tundra that prevails throughout much of the cattle country this week, stocker demand was very good this week. Backgrounders were anxious to buy grass cattle, supplies of good yearlings throughout the country as we move, hopefully we're going to see maybe tighter supplies as we go into spring. But in many areas of the country, we're seeing a lot, especially in the northern plains and Midwest, they're right now securing top quality females for replacement heifers to grow through the spring and turn out with bulls later. In Aberdeen, South Dakota, at the Hub City Livestock Auction, they sold over 250 head of top quality replacements on Wednesday, averaging 771 pounds. It sold with a weighted average price of $235.85. And they sold 120 head of their bigger sisters, averaging 826 pounds. It sold with a weighted average price of $238.77. And in Burwell, Nebraska, last Friday, they sold 165 head of heifers, replacement heifers, averaging 613 pounds for a weighted average price of $264.64. So the heifer, replacement heifer market remains very good and very active, and I've seen quite a few of these replacement heifers being sold throughout the northern plains in the Midwest. There's still layers, though, of overhead resistance out there that will continue to challenge the feeder cattle markets. This week we saw box beef values find some footing, and after a seasonal downtrend, and hopefully the box beef has found its bottom, and we're seeing choice trading over $240 at this time. But looking at maybe some problems, you've got the West Coast labor dispute that's not helping exports at this time. We need some relief from the winter storms that are pounding the northeastern seaboard and major population centers of the country, where it's hurting restaurant business, beef consumption, and just overall meat movement. And still at this time, and you look at the feeder cattle futures, fund managers, they just don't want to be long in the cattle futures at this time. So just need to keep in mind and perspective where commodity prices have been and where they could go. And looking at some regional weighted averages this week in the north central area on steers weighing 600 to 700 pounds, trading at $241.51 this week. That's about $3 higher than last week. 700 to 800 pound steers averaging this week $218.26. That's about $2 higher than last week. And 800 to 900 pound steers at $202.09. Also a little over $2 higher than last week. In the south central regions, 500 to 600 pound steers averaging $266.18 this week. That's about $4 higher than last week. And 600 to 700 pounds, about $6 higher than last week, averaging $236.10. So that's your markets for this week. I want to thank you for listening. Hopefully we'll have a good report next week too. So we have checked more of our markets at this website. I want to thank you for listening. I'm Greg Harrison, and see you next week.